Welcome to the debate. So today we are dissecting the cognitive mechanics of language acquisition. Specifically, that really elusive transition from mentally translating out of your native tongue to actually thinking in English. The source material we're analyzing argues for, well, a pretty radical restructuring of how learners process thought.
And it's a critical distinction to make. The central question we're wrestling with is this. Is the deliberate, almost aggressive suppression of one's native language the only real path to fluency? Or does that approach maybe overlook the basic structural understanding you need to speak correctly in the first place?
I'll be representing the position of the source material. I believe that mental translation is a cognitive burden that creates a processing delay, and that's what prevents true fluency. I advocate for the immersive approach where the flow of thought is prioritized over, say, rigid adherence to grammar.
And I'll be taking the skeptical view. While the goal thinking in English is absolutely necessary, I think the specific methods proposed here, like ignoring grammar and relying on self-talk without any feedback, well, they risk reinforcing errors. I believe this approach really ignores the limitations of a learner's vocabulary and can create bad habits that are incredibly difficult to break later on.
Okay, so let's get right into the mechanics of that processing delay, because the source material really identifies this as the number one enemy of fluency. When a learner thinks in their native language and then tries to translate, the brain it's effectively doing double duty. You form a concept in your native tongue, and then you have to go hunting for the English equivalents. This is what creates that stuttering, halting speech we see in so many intermediate learners. It's not a lack of knowledge, it's an inefficiency of retrieval.
I don't deny the inefficiency. I mean, the brain is certainly working harder during translation. But surely accuracy has to matter just as much as speed, right?
Well, it goes beyond just effort. It affects the very nature of what you say. The material highlights a classic example. A learner wants to express that they're physically cold. In many Romance languages, the structure is I have cold. Now, if you translate that literally, you produce a sentence that's just semantically awkward in English. The source argues you can't fix this by memorizing a grammar rule. You have to train the brain to associate the physical sensation directly with I am cold. You have to prioritize the speed of that connection over the perfection of the sentence.
I see the logic, but that prioritizes output over accuracy to what I think is a dangerous degree. The source material explicitly tells learners, don't worry about grammar, and it even claims that native speakers make mistakes to justify this looseness, and that creates a paradox. If a learner practices thinking in English without any external correction, they might just be internalizing incorrect patterns. You might cure the processing delay, sure, but you solidify the error in the process.
But ask yourself, is a silent, perfect student better than a messy, communicative one? The material suggests that the silence is the bigger failure.
I think that presents a false dichotomy. The source dismisses the fear of making mistakes as just some hurdle. I would argue that fear, or at least the healthy dose of caution, is a useful regulatory mechanism. If you strip away that regulation too early, you aren't building fluency. You're building confidence and incompetence. You're training the learner to be wrong, just faster.
I disagree, because that regulation often just leads to paralysis. Let's look at the practical solution the source offers, the inner voice. The strategy is to basically narrate your life. You talk to yourself during mundane tasks. I'm putting on my shoes. I am drinking coffee. This connects physical reality directly to English words. It bypasses the native language entirely. And the material emphasizes that this should be low pressure because, quote, no one is listening.
No one is listening is exactly the problem. If no one is listening, then no one is correcting. In linguistics, we call this fossilization. If I'm a learner and I say to myself, I am putting my shoes, consistently missing the preposition on, and I do that every single morning for 6 months, I've just fossilized that error. It becomes a permanent part of my speech. So how does a learner distinguish between a native-like thought and a mistake if their only feedback loop is their own limited knowledge?
The source's stance is that fluency is about momentum. You build the neural pathway for English first. You refine the grammar later. The material suggests starting with very simple sentences. I need vegetables, rather than some complex justification for why you're going to the store. If you're paralyzed by the fear of missing one preposition, You never speak at all. The goal is just to get the gears turning.
But those gears need fuel, right? Which brings us to vocabulary. The material promotes a very strict rule. Use English-to-English dictionaries only. The argument being that looking up excited and feeling very happy and eager keeps the brain in, English mode.
Precisely. You're defining words with other English words. You create a whole network of meaning rather than just a linear translation list. It prevents the brain from snapping back to its native language.
That's ideal, I'll grant you, for an advanced learner. But what about the edge cases? What if the learner looks up excited, sees eager, and has no idea what eager means? Now they're falling down a rabbit hole of definitions they can't understand. And then consider the source's advice for when a learner forgets a word, like refrigerator. The advice is to describe it as a cold box where I keep food.
It communicates the idea perfectly. It keeps the conversation moving.
It communicates the idea, yes, but it is circumlocution. It's talking around the word instead of using it. If thinking in English leads to a reliance on descriptions like cold box rather than retrieving the precise term refrigerator, are we actually achieving the sophistication of a native speaker? Or are we just teaching learners a coping mechanism for their deficits?
But coping with deficits is a vital part of fluency. Native speakers use circumlocution all the time when they have a word on the tip of their tongue. Defending this technique is easy. It keeps the brain processing in English. The moment you stop to look up refrigerator in a bilingual dictionary, you've broken the immersion. You've switched languages. Cold box keeps the flow alive.
It keeps the flow alive, I agree. But if you rely on it too heavily, it lowers the ceiling of your competence. You risk sounding perpetually, childish.
I think you're undervaluing the mental discipline that's required here. This isn't just about finding shortcuts. The source proposes a 30-minute no translation rule and the practice of starting and ending the day with English thoughts, planning your day in the morning, reviewing it at night. This is rigorous cognitive immersion.
And I would critique the psychological toll of that rigor. The source itself mentions that learners feel stuck or frustrated by these exercises. You might see this as a gym workout, no pain, no gain, but I view it as a potential barrier to entry. If a learner doesn't have the vocabulary to sustain 30 minutes of continuous thought, this rule isn't just difficult, it's impossible. It risks making them quit entirely.
To summarize, the source material provides a clear roadmap. Name objects, talk to yourself, surround yourself with English media. The awkwardness of saying, "I have cold," is really the smoking gun that proves translation has to be abandoned. To achieve true native-like intuition, you have to accept the messiness of the process.
And I come at it from a different angle. While the destination, thinking in English, is absolutely correct, the map provided here requires some caution. I acknowledge the value of the English inner voice, but I have to warn that without a parallel focus on grammar or feedback, which the source really downplays, one risks becoming very fluent in broken English.
So both approaches seem to recognize that immersion is a powerful tool.
Indeed, it just comes down to the role of accuracy during that process.
We invite you to consider whether you're more of a perfectionist learner or a pragmatic one based on what we've discussed.
Thank you for listening.